Are we off mute? All right. For those of you on the video, can you hear me? Did someone just get off mute and say yes or no?
I see a thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Okay, good. All right, guys. Thanks for coming. We're excited to do our second master class here from Sales HQ. I'm Vince Beasy. I met most of you already though, so I'm the founder of Sales HQ, and for some of you that haven't been here before, it's a co-selling community for folks like yourself, which I would consider high-performing sellers and sales leaders. No, would you guys consider yourselves that? Most of you, or somewhat high-performing, almost aspiring. Ah, you must be a fan of Brian. I'm excited. By the way, so you can hang out for the day. Feel free after the presentation. Brian's going to stick around a little bit after 1, too, if we want to continue the dialogue. We're supposed to stop at 1, but we'll continue on for those who want to stay. I assume you're going to stay until the free pizza is gone. By the way, free pizza for those of you out there, it's really good. It's Randy's Pizza, too, by the way, next time. I'm super excited about the topic today. Raise your hands. Who out there thinks they're an incredible negotiator? Don't be bashful. What, one person, that's it? Out of all your skills, I bet you think your negotiating skills is probably the strongest, right? Right? Everyone's like, yes, the question. You a good negotiator? Oh, yeah, I'm an excellent negotiator, right? But if you ask them, like, hey, how do you work discovery calls? I got some work to do. But no one ever says I need to improve my negotiation. So when I was speaking to Brian about this, he had a couple of topics we were talking about. When he came to the negotiation one, I'm like, and then he was talking about procurement. I'm like, oh, man, I guarantee you, most people haven't gotten any kind of training in regards to really negotiating, but also then negotiating potentially against a really powerful procurement team. So I'm not going to take Brian's thunder away. He's done this a lot. He's an expert on this topic. I'm super excited to learn myself. So I'm going to hand it off to Brian and let him introduce himself. And
Awesome.
All right, man.
Thanks, Vince. And for those of you in the room, I'm going to sort of anchor myself here for the folks that are online. So if you're thinking to yourself, why is he not moving around? It's here. As Vince said, I'm Brian Doyle. I'm the president and CEO of Holden Advisors. I started my career as an Air Force pilot, left active duty, went to General Electric and was a Six Sigma Master Black Belt, and then felt probably like you guys that I could have a greater impact if I moved more toward the front end of the business. So I've been an individual seller. I've led sales teams. I've led marketing teams. And I've had the opportunity to sit on both sides of the negotiation table. I've been the seller and I've been the buyer. And I've learned a ton along the way. And then that's what attracted me to Holden Advisors. Our founder wrote a book called Negotiating with Backbone. And when I read that book, I was like, that's what I should have been doing. So, through those experiences, through what I've learned, I've had the opportunity to grow either my own company's revenue or my clients' revenue by $2 billion over where they would have normally been. To kick off here, though, instead of telling success story after success story, I'm going to start with how I failed. And it started as an individual seller. I was invited to participate in an RFP, a request for proposal, with the Gap. So, major clothing retailer, Banana Republic, Old Navy, the Gap. And when I looked at that RFP, I said to myself, I can make my number for the entire year if I win this thing. So I get in there. I'm doing what good salespeople do. I'm doing good discovery. I'm talking to the person I think is the decision maker, starting to learn what matters to her, what's important to the company, the goals they're trying to hit. And then all of a sudden that stops and I get introduced to procurement. Procurement rolls in, won't tell me anything more about the deal, what they're trying to achieve, any of that. All I know is that the RFP is due in a week and I have to do everything I can to make us be in a position to win. So my team and I work nights, we work weekends, we deliver the RFP. We think it's pretty good. Silence. Then the procurement guy comes back and he says, you know what, Brian? It's all right. You're slightly differentiated from everybody else, just barely though. And you're way too expensive. So I need you to sharpen your pencil, come back around with another round of this RFP and lower the price. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't really care what the profitability on this thing is. If I can close this deal, even at a lower rate, I'm still going to make my number. So I come back around, I lower the price. I go through the process again. Guy beats me up a little bit more. And then silence. 3 weeks after that, I find out I lose the deal. And I lost it to the incumbent. Now, I found out two things in retrospect. Number one was I had no chance of winning that deal. The incumbent was always going to win the deal. My job was to be in there and lower the price so he could point at some other vendor that was lower. Number two was, now that I'm in a leadership role, I'm thinking to myself, would I have been better off winning that deal or losing that deal? Because the profitability was so thin, it probably wasn't a good thing for us to win anyway. And in either case, I just felt terrible. Like at the end of the process, it just felt terrible. And if I had won, I would have felt good about the revenue, but I would have felt used up. And the reason we feel like that is because we as salespeople are on an unlevel playing field. So procurement is very sophisticated. When I say procurement, it could be sourcing, it could be buyers, it could be whatever you want to call it. They are very sophisticated. They have very detailed playbooks, and the more negotiations you do, the more you start to see these playbooks play out. You start to see the same techniques. You start to see all of these things that they're trying to do to drive your price down, get more value, and generally just make you feel like you're used up. When they use these techniques, salespeople in general start to feel like their pricing is unfair. Most salespeople don't really understand how the product is priced. And so when you've got your customers talking to you about, dude, you're a commodity, there's nothing really, special going on here. You're too high priced. I could point at this metric or that metric. You start to believe. And what it does is it erodes your confidence in your price and your value. So you start to sort of scoot over to where that customer's sitting, and it's going to hurt your negotiation. And instead of negotiating with your customer, you start negotiating internally. You go to your boss. Hey, can you hook me up? I just got to get a foot in the door. I just got to get a foot in the door, and I'm going to grow this thing. It's going to be this, it's going to take off from here. You just got to let me in. And that's really inefficient when it comes to a sales organization. So there's that. And then there's just this pressure to close deals. I mean, we've all got it. Everybody's got a quota. And so there's this enormous pressure, and all of this works to procurement or the buyer's advantage. So what I want to do here at the beginning is start talking about the 10 biggest tells. And we use the term tells that procurement uses because this is basically a poker game. And you know how when you play poker and somebody sort of rubs their face a little bit when they got a good hand, or they pull on their ear a little bit when they got a bad hand or whatever, procurement does the same things. So let's see if you guys know any of these or have experience in these. Number one is the value trap. So this is your commodity. You're just like everybody else. What you're selling is exactly the same as others. Anybody? I got a head nod. Anybody hear that one? Okay. There's more. There's good cop, bad cop. Don't need to explain this, but what's funny is that sometimes it's the same person. Sometimes they're nice to you, then sometimes they yell at you, and then sometimes they're nice to you again.
Are you talking about marriage, or are you talking about?
In this context, Vince, negotiation is business, but there are plenty of negotiations in life too, for sure. Yeah. Another one is what we call should cost modeling. So if you sell anything that your buyer knows something about, like I've got a client who sells machine parts, and their client is coming to them saying, been watching the aluminum commodity indexes, and aluminum's getting cheaper and cheaper. Therefore, your price should come down. It should cost this, and I'll let you have another 10% on top of that. Or the software's already made. So it should cost this much. There's no incremental cost for you. It should cost this much, right? I'm seeing head nods. So great. Another one is, like I described in my story, these multiple RFP rounds. So you go through it. Hey, I need you to sharpen your pencil. Anybody heard that phrase before? Lower the price. Goes around it again. I got something to tell you. Sometimes when you get to the second or third round of these RFPs, it is only you. I've been on the other side of this. You just go, hey, I need you to sharpen your pencil. We're going to do one more round of the RFP. You think you're competing against somebody else. You're only competing against yourself, and you are lowering the price for no reason. But that's sometimes how this works. Another here is unbundling and cherry picking. So you're going to sell a bundle, right? A lot of you guys you're going to have a bronze, silver, and a gold package, whatever it is, whatever you're selling. And your customer is going to say, I want these 3 elements of the gold package at the silver price because some of it's still at silver, and they start cherry picking these different things. There's a reason those things are bundled together, and you can't pull them apart. So again, I'm seeing head nods. Hopefully the folks online here are nodding your heads as well. So that's the top 5. There's 5 more that we see all the time. Waiting for the quarter or year end. Everybody's got a quota, right? Everybody's got a quota that typically ends at quarter or maybe at year end. I mean, so when you buy a car, when you go to a car dealership, end of the month, end of the year. They got to get that stuff off the lot. Everybody's got a quota. So they're doing the same thing to you. And if you lower your price at the end of the quarter, you are training them at the end of the next quarter to do the same thing. They're procurement, sourcing, buyers, they're fast learners. A delayed or no response. I listened to a procurement podcast about a month ago, and it was 2 procurement people, and they were talking about, this was the topic, but you're really just stringing it out so that the salespeople get more and more uncomfortable until they start lowering the price or throwing in extra value. What if I gave you this for free? There is deception. So sometimes these folks will lie to you. I have a competitor that's just like you, that's 30% less. It's always 30% too, seems like. Sometimes they're just making that up. They will try to intimidate you. They'll raise their voice. They'll yell. They'll slam their hand on the table. They're just doing that to, unseat you, make you uncomfortable. And then my latest favorite here, and the last one in this list, is I'm disappointed. You guys ever heard that? Yeah. You heard it last week. We're partners, man. I asked you to bring your best and final offer, and you brought this, and I'm disappointed in you. I thought we were in this together, man, and I'm disappointed. And it's hard as sales relationship people not to feel that just a touch. Like, damn, I let him down. You didn't freaking let him down. This is just a technique that's going to get you uncomfortable. And you know why they use all of these techniques? Anybody? Because they work. Procurement saves across the world. These techniques save companies $34 billion. Procurement folks have about a 10, maybe even 15-year head start on you while you're learning how to ask open-ended questions and active listening and your products and all these things good salespeople learn. They're learning to negotiate. That's what they do. And they're looking for a 20% discount. That's what's in the playbook. So they start at 30%. That's why I use that number, because they know they're not going to get typically 30%, but they're going to scoot toward where their target is. And that's how they're measured. You have a quota, they have a quota. At the end of the year, they're going to get measured on how much money they save the company at your expense. So what do? It starts with value. It starts with understanding your own value and being able to communicate your value. We call it the hidden power of value because there's two aspects of here that tend to keep value hidden. Number one is that procurement and sourcing don't want to talk about it. Number two is, generally speaking, although we have an all-star class here in the room and online, your average salesperson is not very good at talking about that. So how do we get to that? I'm going to share a stat that I just think is like super compelling. 74% of buyers say that they will purchase from the first salesperson that brings them insights and value. 74%. So what can we do to bring them those insights and that value? And the thing here is that, one, the first person to do it matters. Secondly, just generally the timing of talking about value matters. So this is around in the blue is a generic sales cycle. So there's discovery, qualify, propose, negotiate, close, and then implement, right? Everybody's got something that looks like this. Inside that in the white is what we call the buyer's decision cycle. So the buyer is going through a thought process while you're going through your sales stages. And what our research has shown is it makes a big difference when you talk about value. So if you can talk about value at the beginning of the sales cycle, in discovery and qualify, that's when they're more apt to listen to it. If you try to show up with value when procurement's now been introduced and you're into the negotiation phase, they're going to say you're just like everybody else, you're a commodity. I don't want to talk about value. So it's way harder to do it there. And as salespeople, we tend to think sort of linearly in that, we go through the deal stages, we close the deal like, sweet, I'm done. Particularly if you're a hunter, move on to the next thing. We have to think more in terms of it being a circle. So as soon as we sell that deal, we're selling the next deal. We're talking about the value that we've provided in that first deal, and then how do we get to the next one? How do we build up that share of wallet? Even if you're not a farmer, you're still thinking about like, who can they introduce you to? You want to be talking about value earlier on. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? All right. So how do we make value feel real for our customers? And I would submit that there are three main buckets. So let me just ask the group here, what, generally speaking, can your customers achieve by buying your product or your service? And I'm asking at a level that's independent of like, I sell software or I sell machine parts or I sell food ingredients or whatever. What can they achieve by buying your product? Yes, ma'am.
They can have
A better career. They can have a better career. So your internal champion their career is going to be better because they're buying what you're selling. Okay. What else? Valuation of the company. Okay.
Sales, increase their sales, depending on what you're selling.
Increase their sales, and maybe I'll scoot it up just a one level and say increase their revenue. Yep. Okay. Great. Productivity. Yeah. So you could increase their efficiency or lower costs. Okay.
Solves the problem they have.
Solves a problem that they have for sure. Yeah. We got to be talking in terms of the customer's problem, not in terms of our product. Right. Yeah. Yes.
increase their value within their organization. I mean, the individuals are making the purchase.
Okay.
They do a good job and bring something in.
So if they buy, I'm sort of repeating so that the online folks can hear. So if they buy your product, one, their career's better, and two, they're bringing more value internally to their organization, which reflects well on that.
Reduce risk,
Ooh, reduce risk. Come with more.
especially if you're selling something that increases security or has like a compliance angle.
Yeah. And
Less
so,
exposure to business.
yeah. So compliance or security or sort of just repeating it. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, you guys nailed that. What I would submit to you is that there are 3 buckets here. They are reducing cost, increasing revenue, or minimizing risk. And you guys nailed it. And when you talk in those terms, one, it's easier to quantify what you're talking about. And two, your conversation gets elevated. So if you're talking to a middle manager and trying to sell to a middle manager who can't make a decision, they're going to be real interested in, can you save me a half an hour a day? But the C-suite is not going to buy your thing if you're saving Johnny, the middle manager, a half an hour a day. But if you are taking care of corporate risk or increasing the valuation of the company, increasing revenue, reducing costs, they're going to care about that. And that's going to elevate your conversation. So when we think about how to do that, there is where a lot of salespeople hang out is features and benefits. So again, all-star class here, but generally salespeople that you know, show of hands, do you think people are pretty good at talking about features and benefits? Okay. Heads mostly not. All right. How about talking about impact and value? How good is the average salesperson talking about impact and value? They're great at that too? I'm seeing no, nose, head shaking, and a clarifying question.
Yeah, I think that it's harder to talk about impact and value because you're not like good at discovery. So I'm learning about they care about impact and value is different every time. Whereas like features and benefits are your expertise.
Oh yeah. So you have to features and benefits. Somebody can teach you. They can hand you the sales sheet and say, talk to this. But when it comes to impact and value, you have to get that from your customer. Yeah. And there's a variety of ways, and it's sort of its own hour in terms of how to quantify value. But just to touch on it, there's things we can learn from the internet. There's things we can learn from like an annual report. There's things that we can learn from our customers, but it's got to come externally. It's not just us trying to jam a product down somebody's throat. That's exactly right. And what we're doing is we're moving from the what, which is what we sell, to the so what. What is it? Why does it mean something to them? So in order to get from, like you were just saying, from our sales sheet, from our internal training, from the thing I can repeat in my sleep, to this sort of dynamic with my customer, I have to overcome one of the salesperson's greatest fears. Anybody? I'm going to take off the table. I'm not getting paid. I'm going to take off the table. I'm not getting paid. What would be another fear? ROI that
they demand ROI, but you don't have discovery, for example.
Okay, so you can't really you have trouble with defining your own ROI, right?
You're
Yes.
asking our fear,
Yes.
not admitting you don't know everything.
Admitting you don't know everything.
Is there rejection?
Rejection.
No.
Yeah, could be. I think you guys you're all like sort of right where I am too. I think that the salesperson's greatest fear is looking dumb. rolling in and like, hey, I'm this expert in my field and I'm going to sell you this thing. And then it doesn't work. And the world is full of very conscientious, smart, energetic marketing people who have created ROI calculators. And they look like these spreadsheets like on the screen. And you show up and you're like, hey, I'm going to prove to you ROI here. Let me just type in your variables and I will show you that it's going to make a lot of money. And then the customer goes, how'd you come up with that assumption? What about this? What formula are you using to come up with that number? And if you let them take the mouse, you're hosed. Because they're going to start double clicking in these cells and you don't have an answer for them. And it's just going to fall apart. So what we need to do when we're talking about value, we got to make it simple. And so if you can't write out your value on the back of a cocktail napkin, give or take, you're probably getting too complicated. And the reason this is important, I can see you're cringing. I can see you cringing about I got to make it simple. Here's why I want you to make it simple. One is that person who is sitting across the Zoom call or sitting across the desk from you has to understand what you're talking about. And as cool as you guys are, and as cool as your products are, they're maybe giving 2% of their mind share to what you're selling. 98 is someplace else. So you got to make it simple for them to understand. Number two, we talked about this a little bit already. That person is going to be your internal champion. They're going to walk that around the halls of your customer's organization. And if you're super complicated, they're not walking it around because they don't want to look that. They're going to say, yeah, the vendor came in. Wait, did she prove her ROI? I don't know. It's like a big spreadsheet. It's hard to tell. But if it's simple, they're going to say, yeah, I feel pretty good about this. This is how they're doing their math. They say to their boss. And the boss goes, oh, that's mildly compelling. And they're talking about increasing revenue, decreasing costs, and minimizing risk. Those are things I care about. Why don't we have them in? Why don't we have a bigger meeting? Why don't I bring my boss to that meeting? But if you have something that's too complicated, they're not bringing their boss to the complicated meeting. Right? Makes sense? Okay. So one of the things that we think about at Holton Advisors quite a bit, and our research has shown, is that one size does not fit all when it comes to talking about value, certainly when it comes to negotiation. We have to understand what kind of buyer type we're dealing with. And we believe that there are 4 buyer types, and 3 of these are not going to be a surprise. So number 1 is the price buyer. This is the no kidding, all I care about is price. I have very basic specs. You meet the specs, I'm good. This is maybe you're selling to the government, might be like this. Any guesses as to how of the percent of buyers that are true price buyers in any market? Doesn't matter. We work across all the markets. What do you think?
Single digits.
15? Okay, single digits and 15. All right. Anybody think higher?
16.
If this were The Price is Right, that would have been great. So you guys are doing great. Oftentimes when we do big workshops like this, and we won't like teach them first, we'll say, hey, you know, who's got price buyers? It's like 70%. Oh yeah, my guys are price buyers. There's nothing I can do. You guys are right. I would say no more than 30%. And when you take the government purchasers out of there, it is around 20% at most. So you said single digits, 15, 16, right in there. So that's a great way to start thinking about this. The next buyer type is the value buyer. So these are people who have some expertise in whatever it is you're selling. They understand the value that you're providing. They're comparing you to others and understanding their value. And they're willing to switch for that value. They will switch around quite a bit. Next up is the relationship buyer. So these are people who maybe they don't even go to RFP. They might have one or two suppliers that they like, that they're getting their hand held through the process on these, and they're good with that. It's all about the relationship. And so, negotiating with them is a little different than the other two. And then there is what we call the poker player. And the poker player is a relationship buyer or a value buyer pretending to be a price buyer. That is procurement. That is when they come in and they go, you're a commodity. You're just like everybody else. I need a 30% discount. There's a guy down the street who's like exactly the same and way cheaper than you. All of these things. That is the poker player. And that's the person that is the hardest to negotiate with. So, so the question is, how do we know we're up against a poker player? How do you know that when you're in the negotiation and you're starting to do this? How do you know you're up against a poker player? Any ideas?
Well, easiest answer is questions, but trying to get,
Questions like, so what sort of questions?
well, recently, so I was trying to ask someone to label departments within a larger group. They were asking, they were pretending to be dumb about how the group is actually organized. I know they get it. So they're withholding information.
So they're withholding information.
So you're kind of putting them on the corner.
Yeah.
Seeing if they're applicable.
Okay. What else?
What I've noticed is it feels a little performative, and also they start to make declarations, right? Like
I'm not even going to continue this conversation. There's, I had somebody the other day who said, he or she, I will try to be as generic as I can. They remind me of one of those blow up things that's outside the car dealership. That's like doing this thing. Oh my God, I can never do that. That'll never happen. I can never bring this to my leadership team, right? Blah, 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 blah. Right? It's like that. It's like declarative. This will never work. Yeah.
What when you start making accommodations for you think you should get a deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, plus he's disappointed in it. Yeah.
Disappointed in your value.
Yeah. That's right. So you start making concessions. What else? How else do you know that you're up against a poker player?
You say that they're looking at other companies.
Yeah, well, they could be. I mean, so like a value buyer or a price buyer could also be looking at other companies. They could legitimately be looking at other companies.
They look at other companies and say they have a better price.
Yeah. Yeah, could be. Yeah.
You actually have to legitimately have a champion. This depends what organization, if they get a lot of trouble putting it there, but get back channel with them and compare answers where, again, goes back to petulant lines. Let's say they're looking at competitors, but the actual executive sponsor is not looking at it.
The executive sponsor is saying one thing and the procurement guy is saying the other thing. And if you can keep that, I mean, that's super important. If you can keep that relationship with the ultimate decision maker, that's super important, because then you can learn some of these things as you go, instead of I'm locked out of information and I'm only talking to the person who's pretending that they either can't share or they don't know. And sometimes, frankly, they don't know.
If they are value or relationship buyers in disguise, then can you just ask them like, hey, assuming we can get you the lowest price, how do we stack up against your other options and why? Or figure out if they're actually assessing you a value relationship. And if they are, then maybe they're a poker player versus a price buyer.
Yeah, there's something there.
It's something that.
Yeah. Trying to get them to talk to you about value versus price. And the reason I hesitated is because it's a little easier said than done. If you say, tell me what you really value, they say it's right there in the RFP. And I'm looking for the lowest price. Why are you still asking me these questions? But there is a technique. So you're nibbling right here where I'm going. So thank you for that. Oh, sorry, Vince. Yeah.
mean, I think of the poker player as simply as the person you're dealing with or says they're the person to negotiate that isn't in a line of business. So they have nothing to lose or gain. That's your poker player.
Oftentimes, occasionally you run across people who are buyers for a relationship manager, say, buyers for a relationship buyer who really just want to get the deal done. So it could be, and oftentimes is, that they're sort of removed. It's also those techniques that I talked about at the beginning, where they start doing these tells, and you're like, I'm in the middle of a game. And I can tell you that when you get that mindset that you're in the middle of a game with these people, it takes a lot of pressure off. You're not trying to figure out, like, what are they doing? Why are they doing this? It seems crazy that, they're not treating me right. It's insulting. Wait a minute. These guys are playing a game. They're measured on getting 20%. I'm measured on closing the deal and getting the revenue. Okay. We're playing a game now. And so the one, what I would call the number one tool for diagnosing a poker player is really where you were headed. And it's something that we call give gets. So let me explain this. So say, you're thinking about the ideal relationship between price and value. It looks like a straight line. The more the value goes up, the more the price goes up, right? Nothing special here. So if your product is that, what procurement is going to oftentimes bring to you is, hey, there's another product, your competitor, who's cheaper. Now, they're not going to tell you it's lower value. They're just going to tell you it's cheaper. But it's lower value. You're familiar with your market. You know what's going on. So there is a very common response. And that common response is lower the price of your product to match the other guy's product, except now you're adding in on all this value. They're getting all this value for free. So not the best decision, but what do we do about it? And the answer is we introduce what we call give gets. And so a give get is, we phrase it all the time like this. Somebody says, I'm going to need you to lower your price 20%. And you say, yeah, I can do that. And what I'll do is I'll strip away these two parts of value. And then you can have the silver level at a lower price instead of the gold level. And you'll notice I said and, not but. So I didn't say I can lower the price, but you got to go to silver. I can totally lower the price. And we can do that by moving to the silver package, and you'll get this, and this at those levels. And what happens when you do that is you get one of two reactions. Either, thank God, I don't have enough money for gold. I would like to buy the silver package. I am a price buyer, and that's going to be great for me. Thanks. Let's move toward contract. Or, no. I want the gold stuff. Don't you try to talk me into silver. And when that happens, we have just changed the conversation from price to value. They have just told you they care about the things that is the difference between gold and silver. They just told you all that stuff matters. Or they may say, three of these things matter a lot. And you say, okay, well, that's part of the gold package, so they all come together. Right? We're not going to learn very quick. But we've changed the conversation. And when we do that, it exposes them as poker players, and it gets us back on that level footing. So when we talk about give gets, they are things that are discrete and they're easy to single out. So for instance, if I said, you will not get access to our 24/7 call center, you will get access to our 8 to 5 call center. If you can legitimately fence that, that's a great give get. If somebody's going to pick up the phone every time they call, you can't use that one because it's meaningless. If you're going to pick up the phone every time they call, whether it's on the weekend or whatever, there's no difference between the gold and the silver now. So you didn't really put a fence around it. So they have to be enforceable. They have to have measurable value to the customer. And they need to be able to be clearly communicated internally to your customer. These are things that as salespeople, we need to coordinate with our internal, our company's group as well. So you say, hey, I'm going to let them, if it's gold to silver and all the pricing set, awesome, it's already done for you. If you say, hey, I'm going to pull off this piece of value and give it to them for a lower price, there's probably somebody in your organization, a product manager or your boss or whoever, that's going to need to okay that, do that ahead of time. So you can have that negotiation instead of internally, you have it back and forth with the customer. These are some examples of gift gets. So, you can sort of see like, different levels of brakes on the car, the IT support I was talking about. We work with clients that do building materials. So it's like, hey, you can have that. You want a lower price on the side of all those homes that for the builder? Yeah, sure. I can go from brick to vinyl, man. The price is going to come way down. If that's what they want to do, if they want to build those sorts of homes, awesome. If they want to build brick homes, well, they're going to need brick. So let's stop screwing around with the price and let's get you some brick. Machine parts can work the same way, depending on what you guys sell. If there's sort of warranties associated with things. And that is what helps us change the conversation. And instead of that relationship buyer and value buyer becoming poker players, we're sort of reversing back and letting them start acting like relationship and value buyers again. Brian.
So the examples you're giving, I'm just gonna see that just later in the sales process, right? So these are just like when you're in negotiation. Have you found that you can go to the gift gets? So
Yep.
you found that, or even data or examples of where the gift get methodology kind of prior to your later stage sets that conversation up a little bit easier. So like the buyers get more conditioned from you as the seller to understand the gift get methodology, like even like discovery it. Send me a brochure. Like, well, I'll send you a brochure and we can set up meeting with your boss. Right?
Let's have a conversation. Yeah. So a couple of things here, Brian. You are absolutely in discovery and qualify trying to understand what matters to them and the levels at which it matters. That is really important. And it's something that I will tell a story here. We got a couple extra minutes. I'll tell an extra story here in a second. You have to uncover what matters to those guys. In terms of the conditioning of the gift gets, sometimes here's the nuance is that you're having those conversations with the decision maker and they're telling you, hey, minimum, I got to have silver level. Bronze is like worthless to me. And maybe I can, some of these bronze things or gold things matter to me too. Then procurement sometimes takes over. And procurement doesn't want to talk about gold and silver. They're like, dude, you're like everybody else. Just lower the price. The guy down the street is giving me like platinum and he's cheaper than you. So I don't even want to talk about gold and silver. So the reason it works like this and works well when you do that discovery is what matters. So those are the things that you are taking away. You're not taking away like random stuff. You're saying, I know the decision maker cares about these two things. Those are the two things I will now pull out of the package to come down to a lower price. And what I've seen with my clients is that sometimes procurement will say, yeah, that sounds great. Lower the price. Cool. They hang up, they call the decision maker and they say, I just want you to know we've agreed to the deal. I took out those two parts that you cared so much about to lower the price. And in that particular instance with my client, the customer, the decision maker customer said, I'll call you back in 5 minutes. And then called back and said, we're back at the original price. We're getting what we need. And thank you. So it's super important that you uncover what those things are. You just can't always use them directly when you get into the sourcing and procurement conversation. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, no, that's what I was asking.
Okay.
How do you condition your decision maker when procurement's gonna come in and
Yeah, so you find out what matters is the most important thing. And then if you are working with the same clients over and over again, you will sometimes the procurement, I've seen emails that weren't supposed to be shared with me that sort of got copied by accident, where they say, look, they're not going to lower their price. They're just going to start stripping away value. And I don't want to strip away any value. So can we just pay them? Yeah. So there's a little condition there. Yes, ma'am.
Has it ever happened to you where you're like, all right, yeah, we'll do 20% off, you're gonna get the silver, but they come back and you're like, oh, well, your competitor is giving us gold, but they're aiding us to sucker and took the 20% off for that, and so we'll go with them, so they're more willing to negotiate. How do you protect against that?
So there are sometimes times that you need to walk away. And I know that it's having been an individual seller, it is hard because you're like, dude, I'm paid on revenue. Okay. I'm like mildly concerned about the profitability of this business, only that they stay in business. Like I'm paid on revenue. And so the way to condition folks like that, to use your word, is internally, let's pay our salespeople on margin. Maybe an element goes on margin. Let's back them up as sales leaders so that if somebody says, I don't think this deal is worth it, I'm going to walk away. If you have a sales leader who says, good decision, then that matters. If you have a sales leader that says, it's the end of the quarter, well, then all the salespeople are going to dive down that hole and start lowering price. So that aspect of it is a team sport. Yeah. Yes.
How do you keep from, when they negotiate a better price, feeling less kind towards them doing the best you can? You're doing a service.
So, I mean, if you feel like you are keeping price and value aligned, then you should be comfortable with providing a lower value service for a lower price. If you're feeling uncomfortable and sort of bitter toward them for talking you down and forcing a lower price, then I would guess that you have not lowered your values sufficiently enough to keep those in line.
I find that hard because that's why I do what I do. I want to help them. And it's fine with holding. That's why I charge more, right?
Yeah.
It's so that I don't have to feel that way. Then when somebody, I was just thinking with, bigger numbers, maybe it is also hard to be able to say, well, that just took money out of my pocket.
Yeah. So what sort of a different topic, but what it makes me think of is maybe take a harder look at your ideal client profile. And if you are, and we come across them too, you start working with people, you're like, these are just not the people I want to work with. I have a really high-end product and service, and they just want the cruddy thing that is cheap. And I just don't want to supply the cruddy thing that's cheap because my reputation is at risk. And so maybe you do one of those, and then you stop calling them. Yeah.
So the last time you said at the very beginning of the presentation, you said they're what the word was, maybe compensated on getting 20% off. That's their goal. So
Yeah.
I always actually wondered this. So is procurement actually like compensated monetarily on the discount they get, or is it just how their performance is judged?
So more often than not, it is not a commission.
Yeah.
So they're not getting, 5% of the 20% they save.
Okay.
They are measured on it, and it's like a bonus.
Yeah.
Or it's you get a 1 out of 5 instead of a 3 out of 5. That's right, performance review. Typically, I have not seen commission where it's.
That's good to know. That commission would make it more difficult for them to give up the discount, right?
Yeah,
So that's what I was asking.
it would. You get real close to a conflict of interest there where it's
Yeah.
like,
Right. They're not-
hey, this guy's minimizing my risk like crazy. It's doing the right thing for my business. And they're like, yeah, but I can get this other guy who's cruddy
Right.
and really save a lot of money. So it doesn't normally work that way.
And so you got the procurement decision maker, and then you got your business decision maker.
You have a procurement professional. You use the term decision maker.
Yes, that's.
I would
actually a great
argue
question.
that probably not a decision maker.
So is the actual decision being made by the business people?
Yes.
So is procurement, they generally have authority, they do not, I'm assuming, to overrule the business person.
Not overrule. Now they're going to influence.
Yeah.
And they're going to say, hey, you told me, decision maker, that you wanted these 5 things. I found you the 5 things at the lowest price. And it sort of depends on the organization. Sometimes decision makers are more involved, and sometimes they're like, it's the process, go make it happen.
I ask a question for the group as well.
Yes.
How many of you know what a blind RFP is? Anyone know what a blind RFP is?
It's a kind of RFP all the options, but then they look at the answers, but not who needs the answers.
That's close. It's like
They're trying to figure out how to write the RFP.
For example,
Right.
they just send it out to 10, 20, whatever companies it is. They probably already have the 1 or 2 that they know. So one of the things I always taught my sales organization is when the RFP comes in, before we even read it or look at it or respond to it, we want to understand where we stack rank against who's going there. Some level of qualification that demonstrates that they didn't just blindly send it to us, because 100% of the time, I've never won ever in my entire career won a blind RFP. You will never win a blind RFP.
Did you, at a point, if we're not already working with someone at that organization, we're not even gonna respond.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even respond.
If you can't, to Vince's point, if you can't get to the decision maker and have a conversation about these value things that Brian was referring to, like sort of the, what matters to you, you walk. And that's what I should have done at the Gap. Except I spun up my team and I worked nights and weekends and I lowered my price. And in our parlance, this is almost like the follow-on version of this class. We call him the rabbit. And the rabbit is out there running. So the dogs chase. You have no chance of winning that RFP. And it's just a waste of time. And it's hard. And like I said, I've been there, man. I was going to make my number for the entire year. And I was like, I got a bid. Oh my God, what if I won? They're not telling me information, but what if I lucked out? And the answer is, you're never going to luck out.
Right.
It never works that way. So, let me, like Vince said, I'm going to be, I'll stand around and tell stories or answer questions or whatever, but let me just kind of finish up with this. So I was coaching a business leader, happened to be in Australia, but this scenario could work anywhere. We had been negotiating with a potential partner of his, so 2 organizations that were going to work together that were going to be absolutely game changing in the Australian market. I mean, like, they were going to go from like never heard of these people to like, wow, they're almost cornering the market. It was that big. We worked on it for 7 months, and we'd get kind of close. And then the other side would say, oh, we want more of a revenue share, or we want these, stipulations, or we want this, it has to work this way, or we hold the data and you don't get access to it, or whatever it was. Back and forth, back and forth. We finally come to an agreement. And the guy who's the president of my client is driving to sign the paperwork. He gets a phone call from the president of the other company, and the guy says, hey, we're going to need a little bit more revenue share in the out years. 7 months into this thing. My client says, first of all, he lets it sit there for a second or 5 of silence. And then he says, I'm sorry, this isn't going to work out. I'll turn the car around. Maybe we can talk next week. And there's more silence on the line. And then the guy on the other side goes, Nah, just come and sign the paperwork. He's like, my board wanted me to ask you one more time. And it's fine. Just come and sign. They came and they signed and it was done. But I mean, imagine those like 15 seconds of like, you gotta be friggin' kidding me. And he would be so inclined to just, all right, fine, I'll cave. But he didn't. He had backbone, as we refer to it. And that made all the difference. So, hey, everybody, I'm going to leave you with this. That's my contact information. It's Brian Doyle at Holden Advisors. If you want to link to me on LinkedIn, that would be awesome. Love to stay connected. And like I said, I'll stay here in the room if you got questions or comments or whatever.
Lots more pizza, so.
There's lots more pizza. But anyway, it's really fun group. I appreciate you coming. I appreciate you participating in everything. And thank you.